Donc, pose à ma position à combat.
Un podcast proposé par Anne Wetsipoma et Pascal Obolo.
L'année 2020 correspond au 60e anniversaire des indépendances de 17 pays africains, dont l'actuelle République démocratique du Congo. L'exposition Through Her, True Her remet en question l'effacement des récits des femmes artistes afrodescendantes de la scène artistique mainstream ou des grandes collections des institutions du pays, comme celle du Musée d'art contemporain de Gand, le SMAC. Cette exposition, initialement prévue au printemps 2020 au Centre culturel de Strombeek dans le Brabant flamand, co-curatée par Anne Wetsipoma et Pascal Obolo, est reportée et aura lieu du 8 janvier au 4 mars 2021. Pour autant, les questions de visibilité des corps des femmes noires, ainsi que celles qui concernent l'effacement de leur récit des récits globaux, s'avèrent d'une actualité encore plus cruciale dans le contexte de la crise sanitaire du Covid-19. L'idée de cette série de podcasts sur une proposition de Pascal Obolo est née de cette envie de partager nos expériences de femmes, artistes racisées, face à cette période de confinement, dramatique pour les intermittents et intermittentes de la culture, et de les mettre en dialogue avec des récits qui racontent l'histoire coloniale d'un point de vue décentré et différent de celui des voix habituelles. Maarten Couttenier sur l'effacement de la violence coloniale dans les récits officiels, cas d'un objet central présenté dans l'exposition permanente de l'Africa Museum. Maarten, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Vous êtes historien et anthropologue, scientifique au Musée royal de l'Afrique centrale. Vous effectuez des recherches sur l'Afrique précoloniale et sur les rapports de domination et de pouvoir exercés par le pouvoir colonial belge à l'encontre du peuple congolais. Vous vous intéressez également aux biographies des objets exposés dans les musées, comme le Kitumba du chef Nekouko, ramené par le marchand Alexandre Delcommune, qui fait partie de l'exposition Art sans pareil, que l'on peut actuellement voir à l'Africa Museum de Tervuren. You wrote an article about the Kitumba, a statuette that merchant Alexander Delcommune displayed at Hall's Gate as early as in the 1880s. These objects, the Kitumba, was coming from Boma. What can you tell us about the presence of this object that is now displayed in the temporary exhibition at the Africa Museum in Tervuren?
Yes, this statue is one of the first objects that arrived in Belgium. That came from Congo.
Yeah, and it was as early as 1880s?
It was in the early 1880s, yes. So I think the first objects were brought by Stanley, and then it was the object of Delcommune, which he brought back from Boma, where he was a merchant for a French trading company. And so he was locally invested in ivory trade and rubber trade. And he was really part of a whole network of local chiefs and merchants. In the beginning, it was more focused on trade, but in the late 1870s, you see that while Leopold II was creating institutes in Belgium, it turned to a political conflict. And so the trade soon changed into military attacks. And it was during a military attack near Boma in Kikuku, little village, that he seized the object.
So at that time, the Conference of Berlin didn't occur yet.
No, this is before Berlin, but this is probably after the creation of the Comité d'études de Haute-Congo. So this was created in 1876 by Leopold II, and just after that, Delcommune started to attack local villages. So there might be a link between the creation of so-called geographical societies and comités and the military attacks in Congo.
So this man, Alexander del Commune, he was supposed to be a merchant. How did it happen to become a military who would start to attack small villages and grab their objects to bring them back to Brussels?
In the late 1870s, begin 1880s, this system of trade, which was copied from the Portuguese system, where Europeans occupied small trading posts at the coast, changed into colonial occupation of a whole territory, which later would become Congo. But this was not the case yet. So you see that Del Commune and Van Gele, Coquia and all the others already tried to create colonial outposts along the Congo River. So they didn't stay close to the ocean, but they already traveled inland. That is a change of system, which was created by the Association Internationale du Congo. And from the other side of the continent, from East Africa, the Association Internationale Africaine also tried to establish colonial outposts. And Leopold II tried to establish, from both sides of the continent, tried to establish colonial outposts that were then later on in Berlin recognized as Congo Free State.
I think that's quite interesting because what we often hear here in Belgium is that before 1885, so before the Conference of Berlin, there were no colonization in the Congo by Leopold II, which happens not to be true, if I hear what you say.
No, it's not true. So 1876 is far more important locally than 1885.
So on a local level.
Yes.
So for the population there.
Yes. And 1885 is more is a treaty on trade. It's not a political agreement. It's more on trade. And so before that date, Leopold II was already occupying the territory, and occupation of foreign territory implies military conflict. And so all the first colonials were military men, were not scientists or missionaries, were trained in the Belgian military and entered the inland to occupy the country, not to discover animals or flowers. So this was really well thought out to occupy the territory and then have access to all the natural resources.
How would they welcome? Like, for example, how was Alexander del Commune welcomed? You already told us he came and he attacked the villages by force, with military force. So how did this encounter started? Because I heard that he happened to be married with a Congolese woman and that he had a child with this woman. So how was that possible? What happened?
Yes, you see, in the beginning there was trade. The main focus was trade, and to have access to natural resources, you had to be embedded within the local community. And so one way was to marry a local Congolese woman and to have a child with that woman, which he then later brought back to Belgium. And so he really tried to get connected. And then in 1976, it suddenly changed. And he, and with other Europeans, he attacked the 9 kings of Boma. And he later said that it broke their prestige. So that's really a change in tactic of Leopold II.
And when he married this Congolese woman, who was she?
We don't know. We have very little information about her and on the child. So that's further research. We'll have to provide answers to that question. But it's the child that came out of this mixed marriage was probably one of the first children out of these mixed marriages that arrived in Belgium.
When he arrived in Belgium, there was no African Museum of Tervuren yet. What happened with the objects that he brought back?
Yes, so he offered the objects to the Congo, to Leopold II, and because there was no museum of Tervuren yet, these objects were incorporated in an exhibition on ethnography in the Portehal, Halleport. And then later on the object was moved to Museum voor Kunst en Geschiedenis. And then later on in 1912 the object went to Tervuren.
What is very specific to this object?
Well, we have the memoirs of Del Commune, and there he explains how he got the object. So it's very well, he documented the process himself. And so he knew the object before the attack on the village of Nekuku. And he used the object also. So this object was kept by an Nganga, so specialists in sorcery. And he used the object to locate thieves. So the Nganga would put a nail into the object and would then say, well, if within 1 week the thieves will not come to me, they will die. So this was very effective, and within a few days the thieves were apprehended. And Del Commune saw that it was a very powerful object. And when he attacked Kikuku, he specifically looked for the object to seize it. And then he used it in his shop or in his storage room, where at night the doors could be left open. So people were very afraid, and he used it as a hostage, he says.
It's a real power object, if I hear
yes,
well.
It's a very, very dangerous object. I went back to Boma in 2016 and I talked to local chiefs about the object, and you could see that it was a very, very powerful object that could kill people or make people deaf or blind. So it's not just an object to look at because it is beautiful. It's a very, very powerful object, and it's hungry also. You have to feed it cola nuts. You have to provide drinks also because it's thirsty. And so this, but we don't know. In Tervuren, the object is exhibited in a showcase without any explanation. So that's why people often compare ethnographic museums with burial sites, because all the information attached to the object is missing. And so you look at the object and the only thing you can say that it's pretty, or that it is strange, or that it is not well made, or doesn't represent the human figure that well, but there's no... Congo is absent. That's the whole problem, according to me.
The objects coming from Boma was a Kitumba. So the statuette coming from Boma that is now at display in the temporary, with brackets, contemporary exhibition in Tervuren. This object is shown and displayed without any contextualization, which means that people don't have access to the way that Del Commune took it, to the way that he planned to take it, and that it was a real robbery. It wasn't a gift or anything like that, as we can sometimes hear. And also, this power object is shown there, but it's almost dead. It's like it has been buried in the hole. Is it shown behind a glass?
Yes, it is, yeah. And so that's, I wrote an article about the object, and the title of the article is EO.0.0.7943. And that's the title. And that is the number of the object. So ethnographic object number 7,900, etc. And so this shows that objects with a meaningful history are reduced to numbers. And you also see it in the photography. So every object, when it arrives in the museum, gets a photograph. But the photograph is neutral. So it's a sort of gray background. But Congo is absent. And so all these techniques take away all that is local and its culture and so, but it's left is a meaningless object.
Here, what I hear is that Congo is absent, but not only Congo, because Alexander de Commune wrote about it, and even that is not present in the display of the exhibition of the object.
It is mentioned in the catalogue. So, but yeah, then you have to get the catalogue and then read it and then find out for yourself. But it would be better to have it within the showcase to provide information on how and not only on this subject, but on every object in the museum, how it is collected, what is the meaning of the object. And so this information is sometimes lacking, or we can do research by going back to Congo and investigate how objects were collected.
And those carnets of Alexander de Commune, where can we find them if we want to have access to it?
Del Commune is a special case because he published his memoirs. So it's a 2-volume book, and there he explains everything with a remarkable openness. I think he was very proud to tell his story. This was 1922, and Leopold II had died, so I think he was very proud of his achievements, and then he just described the attack on the village Kikuku as something heroic, and he was very proud that he set the village on fire, etc., etc. So all this cruelty is described as an accomplishment, as the introduction of civilization in Congo.
Do you have information on how many people went to visit those objects at the Porte Halles, for example? Because I think it's also important to realize how famous and how popular those exhibitions were for the large public here in Belgium.
On Porte Halles I have no visitor information, but Tervuren was immensely popular. Even before World War II, a lot of children visited the museum. And I think millions of people have seen the object in Tervuren.
With this heroic gaze too, like, oh, they brought back something, like they did something good?
No, because all the information was lacking and people were not very interested in Congo. I think most people that visited Tervuren just saw strange objects linked to sorcery, and so it only confirmed the idea of Congo they already had as being primitive, as being backwards, as people that were cannibals or that didn't believe in Christ but in sorcery, etc., etc., etc. So these objects didn't change their perception. It only confirmed their ideas about the primitive other. And so when you talk about the other that is primitive, it asserts your self-being as being civilized or better than the other.
About cannibalism, I think you told me something interesting about the cannibalism, because it's also an idea that is very, very, very much present in the colonial propaganda in people's minds until today, is that people in Africa, and especially in the Congo, were practicing cannibalism, that they were eating each other's. And sometimes you even have people who would start to become anthropologists and tell you, yeah, but it was only because when a chief would have victory on another chief on another villages, then they would eat a part of the brain or something. What can you tell us about this?
I've never seen any proof of cannibalism in Central Africa or Africa in general, or in Asia or in Europe or worldwide. So there's a number of books on that subject, especially the man-eating myth, which is a famous book of the 1970s. And humans don't eat humans. So only in rare cases when a plane crashes into the Andes and there's no way of survive but to eat that passengers, then there's cannibalism. But normally people don't do that. So that's one of the taboos that exists worldwide. it's mainly a preoccupation of Europeans. So you see this in fairy tales where witches eat little children, and so this is very present in Europe. The idea was then exported to Africa. And so when people in Congo say, we will attack the village and we will eat them, this means not that they will eat them, that means that they will kill them. It's like we in Europe say, I love you so much, I could eat you. That doesn't mean that you're going to eat your lover. That means that you really like her or him. But people have had this fixed idea about cannibalism, and so when Africans said, we will eat him, they said, well, you see, he's a cannibal.
That's really interesting. It's true that when you want to see something, then you see it everywhere.
And when you read, for example, the most cannibalistic people they thought existed in Congo was the people near Mbandaka, the Bangala. But when you read the book by Kukia, so Kukia was the first Belgian military man in Mbandaka.
Ah, that's why the name of the Mbandaka was Coquilletteville.
Coquilletteville. And so he wrote a book in the 1880s, Sur le Haut-Congo. And he writes on the Bangala are not cannibalistic. I've never seen any proof, but the people next to the Bangala, they're cannibalistic. And so probably the Bangala said, yes, but you don't have to go there because they will eat you.
And so,
which means they will kill you. But Kukia didn't understand, then wrote later on that neighboring tribes of the Bangala were cannibals, without offering any proof. If he would have gone there, they would have said that the Bangala were cannibalistic.
Yes,
and so
course.
This is a sort of trope and a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you want to see things, you can always find proof.
Let's now talk about the pre-colonial history, because we know colonial history or even pre-colonial history by writings that Europeans made. But in your article, Eurocentrisch, denken, voorbij, you are more interested into telling this history by the descendant of the people, of the former chiefs who were present and there into the pre-colonial period. So you go there with Sami Balogi, the artist and photographer, and you speak with the people, with the actual chief, and you can tell probably a whole different story all of a sudden. What can you tell us about this?
Yes, if you do research on oral tradition, because history in pre-colonial Africa was mainly oral. It was transmitted by voice and not by writing. And so this is a very, very powerful instrument.
The oral history?
Yes, and this can go back several hundreds of years, as Jan van Sina has shown with the Kuba. And he practically invented the technique to transform oral history into written history. And when I went to Katanga with Sami Balogi and to Bunkea, which was the ancient capital of the Yeke, we interviewed a lot of people in Bunkea, and they told us about their people, about their history, and they're very proud to share that information with us. And there you see the power of this oral tradition. And you also see that it's very different from written European sources.
So what did the European sources said?
Well, for example, there is a written report of how Mziri died. Mziri was the Yeke chief, and Botson killed him in 1891. And if you read the report of the surviving Europeans, they said that Mziri attacked Botson first, and that he acted in self-defense. If you go to Bunkea, they will say that Mziri was unarmed at his home with his wives, and he was minding his own business, that Botson arrived and was very angry and impolite, and that Botson shot him without any warning. Then Mziri turned to go inside, and then Botson shot him in the back. So as a military man, this is something you don't do, according to military honor. Then you have two stories about the same event. So what did happen? We don't know, but it's very interesting to see that there's two truths. So Africans and Europeans make their own idea about what happened and use that in their present to affirm their message or their idea. And so Europeans coming back from Congo and writing in journals about their presence in Congo could not tell that they shot a chief in the back. So they said he attacked us and it was in self-defense.
It sounds so much logical. You wouldn't say that you shot someone in the back. And were there also objects that were related to the Yeke population that have been brought back here to Belgium?
Very few, but we have one elephant mask in the Tervuren Museum. But there you also see that it's exhibited without much information. And again, it is because it was collected by military men. In this case, by Charles Lemaire, who was really a brutal man. And he was not interested by local culture. He just took the objects. And when you read his published journal, he's only interested in the sensational part of the story. So the trunk of the elephant, which is made in wood, is hollow. You can drink with the trunk. And so the whole rich context of this object was then reduced to an anecdote. And I went back to the register also in Tervuren, and there's a number, and then mask, point. And so all the information about Yeke history is missing because the object went to Tervuren. Congo was left behind, and the only thing that went to Tervuren was the object itself without any information.
When we also know that the mask used to be sometimes worn and danced, and they were used in a certain context, and according to the way they were used, they would have a different meaning. So all of that is lost.
Yes, and the only thing left is a photograph taken by Francois Michel, but there you see that is really posed. So there's an African man with the mask on, but he also is in traditional outfit, and he's holding a spear. So is this true, or is this representative of a reality that was happening or not? We don't know.
You have told me a few different names around this Yeke chief and this Yeke population. Charles Le Maire, Botson. The last one that you said is
Francois Michel.
Francois Michel. Who were these people? And we were in the pre-colonial era. When were we exactly? Do you have more information?
Yes, so this is Katanga, the south of Congo, which was very rich in salt and copper. Belgian colonials knew this, of course. But the area was controlled by Mziri, and his empire was the size of France. So this is a large territory that is under his control, and he's occupying all the copper mines. Of course, this presence of Mziri is limiting Belgian colonial power. And you see that Leopold II sent different expeditions to Mziri to get rid of him. So the first was Del Commune, who was previously in Boma and took the object of Nikuku, was sent then to Mziri. And then later on other Belgian people were also sent to Bunkea. The first expeditions were not even welcomed by Mziri. So he just said, I don't want to see you, which shows his power. He was able to say, no, I don't want to talk to you. And then you see that he allowed Belgian colonials to establish a colonial outpost near Bunkea, but he said, not in Bunkea. You go 40 kilometers away from here, and you will install your colonial outposts on the borders of the Lofoe River. Belgian people didn't know, but Mziri knew that very well, where there are a lot of floodings, a lot of water, and so a lot of mosquitoes, and so malaria. And you see that a lot of Belgian people died, also a young child, Floor Cerkel, died there, which again shows the power of Mziri, sending people to inhospitable places where he knew they would die. And so it was only when Botson arrived in 1891 that he was killed by this military man. And then he was succeeded by Maquette Bantu, who met with Charles Le Maire. And then it became something else, because the power of the Yeke was broken. But Maquette Bantu tried to collaborate then with the Belgians to attack common enemies. So, for example, he used the presence of the Belgians and their weapons to attack Sangha people that were blocking the trade route to Angola. And so you see a different power constellation after Mziri, and people collaborating, resisting, and it becomes very, very complicated. Everybody tries to make the best of it.
It really shows that the Congolese people had their own political strategies, that the Belgians used them to establish their powers on the region, but that the Congolese people also used them to assert their own power with their weapons. So it was like a collaboration. It sounds like something very, very contemporary, actually.
Yes, this was a tactic that you see everywhere. So, for example, in Mbandaka, Kokia arrived and he joined forces with the Bangala. And then they attacked neighboring villages. So it was very clever. If you look at it from a European point of view, because there were very few Europeans. Kokia was there alone. So he needed African soldiers to work with him. And so he made alliances with local chiefs. They signed these big contracts with an X. And then he said, well, now I will provide military protection. So you are safe. But now we will attack villages next to you. And so they had pre-colonial rivalries. And the Belgian colonials used those rivalries to extend their power and their occupation of the land. And so by attacking more and more chiefs, they had a larger territory, which was then open for ivory trade, rubber trade, and so on and so on.
And in the end, what would happen to those chiefs who collaborated with the Belgians?
Well, they also took profit out of it. So you see a Belgian colonial arriving with high military power because they had shotguns, and so it was very difficult to fight them because you knew that they would win. So what they did is said, okay, I will collaborate with you, but leave me alone. And then they said, okay. And so everybody was trying to survive in a very violent context.
Thank you very much for those information. Would you like to end with something about maybe contemporary history and how you make the link in between the history that you have researched in the Congo now and the contemporary history in between Belgium and Congo?
Yes, I think that the consequences of colonization are still present today. So this military conflict that went on for many, many years, and then the economical exploitation of the Congo that went on until the 1960s and is in some way still continuing by Chinese or by American mining firms. This whole process has completely dislocated and destroyed an African local culture. And of course, this has consequences until today, not only in Congo, but also in Belgium, where Congolese Belgians or Belgian Congolese still suffer the consequences of these preconceived ideas about African people that are lazy, that are filthy, that have no brains, and so on and so on and so on. And you see that colonial propaganda created those ideas. And colonial propaganda was very, very powerful because it used television, radio, museums, schools, etc., etc., etc. And it's very difficult to change now. And that's why I think we need more research and proper schooling. I think with a lot of attention on the colonial period and on pre-colonial Africa to enlarge our horizon, I think that is very important.
Nzila kafweni ina kakwendela bigleko bikaneti mitudi nandi kuna mveza yandi babweni kuna gana bamweni ngika yoke lenge fwendi kwana na baleke na bana solo mama nika weki nguruko solo mama hey lila mami Iwalo santi mani mekondi kala Ame ya wolo Tumbaga tumbalendi mama Sambaga sambani tuyu yubala lepo Ami Beto vene ya koko Vene ya koko dilenji la wo Mwini wo ulembele ulembele Mwini wo ulembele ya koko Pretty sunny sele Oh, tilitiri no lato patwaje. Viva vita mori ningi wa de mpungi wirizo. Viva vita mori mama le nako. Yani vamweli kunele. Sambaba se mikuna landa lonele. Bikulomba la nina tele kolonzola ya 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 ya. Kamonali sakalonda ko. Salalo mami lamba baba. Zoluale. Yali wala tele na lusala mulunzeli mame ya. Bigwi
Cette série de podcasts est le fruit d'un partenariat avec le Centre culturel de Strombeek, le SMAC, les commissaires Anne Wetsin-Poma, ASBL Nouveau Système Artistique, Pascal